You're listening to Journalists on Journalism, a weekly podcast brought to you by Stanford's graduate program in journalism. For more information and upcoming speakers, visit journalism.stanford.edu.
Welcome to the September 29th edition of the Stanford Journalism Forum. I'm Josh Hicks.
And I'm Jamie Hansen.
This week's seminar featured Peter Maass, a contributing writer for the New York Times Magazine and the author of Love Thy Neighbor, A Story of War. Peter has covered international conflicts from Bosnia to Iraq and Afghanistan. Most recently, he turned his sights to the oil industry and its global impacts. His most recent book is Crude World, The Violent Twilight of Oil.
I want to talk about, what I've done, how I've done it, and kind of how it fits into what's going on in journalism today. But I kind of want to set it all in the context of kind of the uses and necessity of passion and commitment. And I don't mean it in the sense of passion and commitment to the art of reportage, or passion and commitment to get a staff job at the New York Times or win a Pulitzer Prize. I kind of want to set that, what I mean by it is the context of passion and commitment to ideas, to causes, to beliefs, to systems. And I say that because, particularly when I was coming of age as a journalist, there was a real emphasis on, neutrality, on being kind of, the observer, being distant from events that you can kind of, objectively look at them and tell everybody what's going on. And there's a place for that, and that was really good, but I chafed against that a lot, and I ended up kind of breaking out of it. And I think that it's actually quite useful now to break out of that, to not be afraid of voice, to not be afraid of being an individual with views, with ideas, and expressing them in the first person even.
Peter spoke about covering the war in Bosnia and how his experiences there, like witnessing atrocities, created a desire to write in the first person.
The problem that can develop from that is if all you do is just announce yourself. Everything's about yourself. Everything's about your ideas. And you don't bother to report, or you don't bother to report deeply.
Peter described one incident in which he observed Serbian soldiers beating a Muslim prisoner before what was to be the man's execution. He talked about the frustration he felt over not being able to write about that event because it wasn't news.
I felt really strongly about what was going on, because when you cover something really deeply, and particularly if it's a war, you learn that there are things such as good and bad, right and wrong. And, when I mentioned how I kind of chafed under some of the restrictions of, kind of neutral reporting, as it were, I felt that I couldn't really kind of, say what I wanted to say. And, I couldn't really kind of put things into the context that I thought they should be put into the context of. So after covering this war for 2 years, and again, things happen to you when you really get deeply involved, and you kind of, realize you have to choose sides, that, hey, there is right and wrong going on here in this war. There is a genocide.
Peter returned from Bosnia wanting to make greater sense out of his experiences.
There were all these kinds of incidences like that, which I felt very kind of unfulfilled about in terms of processing them, but then also in terms of letting readers really know what it's like to be in a war zone. So after 1992 and 93, I decided to write a book about the war in Bosnia, to really try to make it cohesive and coherent. Because one of the problems I also had with newspaper reporting, which is, a wonderful endeavor, but one of the problems I had is that it's kind of incoherent. If you're a reporter covering, whether it's the war in Bosnia or whether it's the war in Iraq or whether it's a beat about city crime or whatever, you go from one story, one headline to the other, little kind of like postcards from the front lines of whatever the story is. But these postcards aren't necessarily in order, and these postcards aren't necessarily as deep as you want them to be.
Peter described one incident in which he observed Serbian soldiers beating a Muslim prisoner before what was to be the man's execution. He talked about the frustration he felt over not being able to write about that event because it wasn't news.
So I decided I wanted to write a book about this. And initially I wrote a proposal, and it was rejected by a book proposal by every publisher that saw it. And so I went back to the drawing board, and I said, okay, I'm going to write it kind of as a memoir. And I wrote it kind of as a memoir, not because I say this with as much modesty as I can, not because I thought my experiences were particularly experienced, but what I did go through was a way to get people here in America, wherever, interested, to read this book so that they would learn about what happened around me, what happened in the war. I don't care what people thought about what I did. I don't want them to feel sorry for me, because what I saw, what I went through was just absolutely, and honestly I say this, nothing compared to what everybody else who was a soldier, who was a civilian, who was captured, who had a relative who was harmed in this war experienced.
In signing off, Peter left the group with a sense of mission.
I mean, like, becoming a journalist these days is like joining the Marines or the Peace Corps. You know, it's a mission, because you're not going to be paid a lot for it. You're going to have to figure it out for yourself. But it's as rewarding as that.